Let's talk herd. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Camille.
Thank you for being here.
It's okay.
So, when I was thinking about what we would talk about, this idea of ownership, how we own horses, came to me. And I find it really fascinating, actually. When you start thinking about it, it's quite an enormous thing. And I think it's we're very conditioned to it, because I was thinking, well, I don't feel like I own my horses, so that's okay. But then if I don't own them, then, why don't I set them free? And obviously that's not going to work, because the world is set up for us to own things. And so, yeah, it's like really quite an interesting subject. So I thought we could maybe start with exploring that and see where that goes. How do you feel about it with your herd?
Yeah, I mean, like you, I don't come from a place of ownership with them. It, when I review, when I reflect on how it is for me, it is that I've always been passionate about horses, and my life has unfolded in such a way that I have horses, and I sort of see myself more as a sort of
Yeah.
guardian of them, really, and a sort of holder of the medicine that they can bring. Yeah, so I don't speak of owning them. They're more, sort of alongside. I
Yeah.
am alongside what they offer, and they are alongside
Yeah.
what I do. You know, yeah. Yeah, the Native Americans, I think, had a lovely concept of non-ownership of the earth, and
Mm.
I think I'm quite in alignment with that thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, because their whole setup
Yeah.
allowed that in a way, the way that they didn't. If you don't start owning anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we can extend that concept to obviously the land itself, and the land we keep the horses on,
Mm.
you know, and it's fenced.
Yeah.
Here in the Cotswolds, the boundaries are mainly stone walls, Cotswold stone walls,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
we use electric fencing to divide that. And again, that feels to me
Yeah.
like a custodianship. That the horses are living with us, and we need to maintain the ground so that we can feed them. And that feels to me
Mm.
why there are fences and boundaries around my land, or the land that I keep my horses on. You see, just then I said my land,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
you mentioned
Yeah.
conditioning earlier, and we are very conditioned, aren't we?
Yeah.
And it's so insidious, and you
Yeah.
know, things like that phrase, my
Yeah.
land, my horses, pops out of your mouth so easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what would happen if we, when we start to, the guardianship idea starts to become more manifested, and maybe land becomes common land, and how people would feel about that, because it would change things in terms of horses having more freedom to go where they want. And because in a way we sort of, I suppose, when you think about it, we do impose our ownership, we impose our relationship to the extent that we bring the horses, into our lives mechanically as such. But then I think that the vibrational element is really it works through whatever structure is there. So, we still attracting them and they're still choosing to come to us. They just go through the passageways that are open to them.
Absolutely.
So I suppose the same thing would happen if it was less, if the fences were less physical in a way.
Yeah. To do away with fences and to open the land up, that's quite a seismic shift, isn't it? In the way our world is set up, and also in our attitudes and our psychological and emotional, makeup. It is. We have become more, haven't we? We have become more possessive.
Yeah.
And I think that reflects on our sort of hypervigilance at the moment in this climate, particularly around, safety.
Yeah, that's a good word.
What is safe and what is, and survival.
Yeah.
We seem to have become much more fearful.
Yeah.
Actually, of what we can lose.
Yeah, it's true.
But I liked what you said there, that the horses for me, I've got 16 horses at the moment, and of those 16, I didn't go out searching to buy. Maybe 2 or 3 of them have I gone out and bought. The others have found their way. And when I speak to other people who are setting up, businesses and establishments like Hartshaw, they say the same thing, that once you've arrived in a place and you've said to the universe, here I am and this is what I want to do, the horses do find their way, somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think even if you do go out and actually buy them, that they might, you might think it's for a certain reason or purpose, but that can easily change to, suit what's really supposed to come out of the relationship. Yeah. I just like to imagine, how we might evolve and how things might change. But it is true that we're on this trajectory, like away from the more communal, tribal way of life. And, it has become very individual and, everyone with their own house and their own property and their own things and and the animals are part of that. So it's interesting to see where that might evolve, really. And maybe animals will just become more independent. So they don't, because in a way we've made it so they need us because they depend on us because we've kind of created that dependence. So maybe a new paradigm will come out of that they get back their independence in some other way. And we can be more equal.
I think I think in some other way is a significant part of what you just said, because it cannot, go back to the way it was, because we're not on a backward trajectory, we're on a forward trajectory.
Yeah.
And who knows how it will unfold? Who knows what it will look like, 30, 50, 100 years from now? We can't know that.
No, exactly.
So, it is how we are assembling ourselves in this moment, because, because that's all there is. And here where I live here in the Cotswolds, we have a large expanse of common ground.
Yes.
It's a big common. It's called Minchinhampton Common.
Okay.
And I think altogether there's something like, this might be completely wrong because I'm hopeless with figures, but I think there's something like 180 acres of common land.
Yeah.
And farmers have rights to graze their cattle on it. So in the summer, in May, 250 head or 500 head of cattle are released on that common ground, and they stay throughout the summer.
Wow.
And there's a bunch of horses that are also allowed to do that.
Yeah.
They are like gypsy cobs. They're big, but big. They're sort of 15 hands coloured cobs, and they're loose on the common. And there used to be a donkey as part of that, but he passed away last year.
Okay.
But the common is intersected by roads and traffic.
Yeah.
You know, and on average, 8 cows meet their end each year on the common because they're drifting across these roads in the middle of the night, and you know, and they get hit. So you can see, you know, the concept of opening up the land and letting everybody run free.
Yeah.
You know, we'd have to do away with roads, right? You know. So yeah, but as I say, I think it's how you assemble your attitude to, you know, having land.
Yeah. Because it has to, I think the manifestation, like what the external world reflects
Absolutely
where we are in terms of our consciousness. So I suppose maybe in a world where there were no fences, people would have a much deeper intuition. So they wouldn't be driving into animals, you know, they'd be more aware of everything. So it would just be
right.
a lot more.
Yeah.
It is interesting to think about it.
Yeah.
And that, I think what I was thinking of when you were talking was that it is going into, like, the direction seems to be that we're going into more dialogue with the animals in all different ways. But, you know, different people do it in different ways, whatever their gift might be. But it is more about talking and sort of not just imposing what we want to do, or what, you know, thinking of the horses as a sort of a means. Like, I suppose we started with, they were a means of transport, and then they were a means of pleasure, and it is becoming more that people care about the actual conversation with the horses, you know, like even like coming to the realization that they have a voice is quite a big shift, isn't it, really, that we can actually talk to them and hear them, and that they actually do have opinions about things.
Yes.
So that seems to be where it's going.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where I'm going, you know, in what I do. I mean, I've recently been teaching a home education group of young children, and they've been coming for half a day once a week as part of their home education curriculum. And they're 8 years old, and they're all girls, but that's just happens to be the way it is. And I have not been, so they've been interacting with the horses, and we've been learning how to communicate, you know, and how to, you know, have an intention to do something with the horse, but to allow the horse to have his or her part of the conversation in that. And riding has not been a part of it. It's been just being on the ground with the horses. And one day, this is one particular little girl. It was very fond of the pony called Moth.
Oh yeah.
And one day, when they were there, Moth had decided to fall in love with the herd leader and was trying her very hardest to, seduce him. And she wasn't interested in playing with the little girls. So we went out into the herd, and the intention was to bring Moth to get involved in some games or whatever we were doing, and Moth very clearly was not interested.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation, that was the session. That's what we talked about. We talked about, what happens if the horse says no. I've got something else on my agenda today.
Yeah.
And we dealt with the child's disappointment around that, because it was quite intense. The disappointment was intense.
Yeah.
And rejection and taking it personally and all of that. So it was a really good learning experience.
Oh, yeah.
And we asked a different horse. I said, why don't we go and ask Carly if she will join us, and she did. So we were able to but that's what I've been really keen to teach these kids is it asking permission. Does the horse want to join you in your intention? And if not, what can we do about that?
Yeah, it's really fundamental.
Yeah. For the last session, I did offer some riding, and I said, I said the horses might be happy for us to do this because it's your last session before Christmas and la la la. So we went out to see if that was the case, and 3 horses joined us. But what was interesting was that 2 of the girls didn't want to. They didn't want to do it. It wasn't fitting with them.
Wow.
So they did something else with their pony.
And do you think that was as a result of what they'd been learning with you, like what they'd been picking up?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do think that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Because I think, it's changing. This is all changing, as we speak. Things are changing, as you say, and in our relationship with the animals. But so many people still don't appreciate that there's other things you can do with horses. There's not riding.
Yes.
So many people, so many parents think this is why they bring their children, but that is changing. In this very area here, we've got 2 or 3 establishments such as mine. There's three operations.
Wow, yeah. That's great.
In close proximity, who are doing similar horse work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is true that it's so easy to get into a routine with horses, and then you just don't think outside of that. That's just it, You go up and you do whatever work has to be done, and you ride, and then you start thinking, well, I don't have time for anything else because I've got to ride, and it just becomes very limiting. I can remember when I really disengaged from that sense of having to do that, and it was so powerful. It was like, wow, it's such a freedom. I mean, it happened in stages, and the first big liberation for me was after I'd done the last BHS exam that I tried to do. British Horse Society, just for people who don't know that, and it's so traditional and conventional, and that was a whole thing, that exam, that I won't go into, but I didn't pass it because I just wasn't what they wanted at all, and I hadn't trained with someone, and it was kind of unfair because it actually went really well every stage of it. But failing that exam was like such a gift, because it was like, well, what now? I can't go that route anymore. I can't be validated. I can't do the instructing thing and get it all, because I was doing it so that I could get the qualifications here. And I just thought, well, I don't have to do that anymore. And it was just amazing. It was like, well, now we can do exactly what we want to do, you know? And I think when people realize that actually there's no rules about what you do with your horse, or the only rule really, or the only guidance I would say, is that you do what you enjoy. And that's what those little girls were learning. I mean, it's amazing that they were making those decisions. And yeah. And I think the other thing that we sometimes don't realize, or that I remind myself as well, is that the horses are also evolving.
Yeah.
You know, they're also, just as we are. You know, they are, as we change and as we listen to them, they're becoming more aware of us. And as we listen more to them, I think they're able to develop themselves as well. So it's a two-way thing. So it's not always going to stay the same.
No.
That's, I think, sometimes what puts people off, that they feel like, you know, if I just ask the horse, they'll say no. You know, they won't want to do anything with me. They just want to graze because, you know. And I think that maybe there's a time for that, you know, like a kind of a sort of cooling off period, that you need to allow them to get back their voice. And then when it comes back, it's really powerful what can happen.
Yeah.
And I think this thing about people coming into horses later and not being stuck in those pathways from when they were very young, pony club and riding club and things like that, that's really powerful as well, because they can bring in new ideas that other people haven't thought of, maybe, because they're not so stuck. So you were saying before that you were in before our podcast today, that you went to America and you worked with someone who was just getting into horses. That's a kind of similar situation.
That's right. This is a lady who is in her later 60s, and she's living in the mountains in Pennsylvania. And she suddenly found herself feeling very drawn to become involved in horses and to have a horse. So she was in touch with me, and we had a conversation around that. But she was very beautifully, you know, single-minded and you know, very intentional in what she wanted to do. And she went out and she found a Percheron, little filly, a yearling Percheron. And she called her Seraphina, and she you know, she had Seraphina. And when so Seraphina had come from an Amish background.
Oh, okay.
And had been shod as a foal with very, like, all around iron, you know, boots,
really,
so that she will pick her feet up.
Okay, I've never heard of that.
So she was very compromised in that way. So she was wearing these hideous things. So the first thing I advised was that those were taken off. And when that happened, Seraphina found it very difficult to move, to walk. She was hugely out of balance, you know. And this was 2 years ago, so Seraphina is 3 now. And big, you know, being a Percheron, she's up there. She's about, you know, on her way to being 18 hands. And still quite a little bit unbalanced. So if you pick up a foot, she's not sure she can stand on you know, on 3 legs. You have to give her plenty of breaks to come back to the ground. this lady came across a couple of people on the internet who had a therapy business, an equine therapy business, and they were wanting to move to Florida because they were older and they were in poor health, and they gave her their therapy herd of horses of 5.
Wow.
So she went from no horses to 1 horse to 6 horses.
Wow.
And having had no experience of keeping and managing horses, she, and I've had the good fortune and then the privilege and the honor to be sort of party to her, evolution and development with this. And
so cool.
It's been so interesting because, as you say, she with no conditioning in traditional horsemanship, she's wide open to this kind of new old way of being, where you're listening to the horses, and for me, watching her, make mistakes has been very triggering for me, because I want to say, oh, don't do that, or do that. Why are you doing that? You need to do this, and I've watched that in myself, and the judgment that comes up, around thinking that the way, the way. I know the way you should be with horses.
Yeah, because of your experience.
From my 50 years experience, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And having to really rein that in and allow her unfolding, because I think that, she's keeping her horses on a beautiful piece of land in the Pocono Mountains.
Wow.
Very rich in, Native American history and presence and all of that. And it's a little like oasis in an environment that's really not that. Most of the horsemanship practiced in that area is very traditional.
Yeah. Okay.
And she's there like this little oasis. And yes, I was there in the fall, helping her and being alongside her with another friend of mine, helping her to facilitate the horses to come together as a herd that is going to be able to offer their medicine in that place.